Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
So I guess if folks could mute yourselves at this point, just because you may have background noise or other things going on, that would be really helpful. I see Mary Callie. If you're able to do that, that would be great. Okay. So we're going to begin. I'm so glad you're here. So I just wanted to do a little 3 sessions on this book. So there is no good card for this. What to say and do when life is scary, awful, and unfair to people you love. And I think we can all agree that this year, life has been scary, awful, and unfair, either for us or for our loved ones. And so I've broken this course into 3 sessions, and the first session will be kind of an introduction and talking about some of the barriers and to reaching out, what keeps us from reaching out, and then some of the differences between compassion and empathy. And then we will also be doing some deeper sharing and even some scenarios, I think, before the night is over. And then next week, we'll spend a lot of time talking about constructive listening and also just pitfalls to avoid. And then we'll probably hear from each other quite a bit in the 3rd session. So yeah, so this is not rocket science, and yet I think there are skills involved. There is a skill involved in knowing the right thing to say at the right time and the right way to show up at the right time. I think many of you have those skills already, but sometimes when things are very scary and very hard, we can suddenly forget what we thought we knew. So what I would like to do is begin with kind of my best attempt at a Zoom Lectio Divina. So just take a moment to, I'm going to show you an image and play some music to get us in. And what I would like you to do is just to take a look at this image and listen to this music, which is inviting us into considering loss, some of the losses that we may also have been experiencing this last year. So just to prepare yourself, so that's how we're going to begin, just considering loss and grief. And then after the song and the image, I will lead us into a poem, and I will read the poem, and then David Hannah will also read the poem again. And then Kate Sweeney will read the poem again. And so we'll hear it 3 times, and then we will break out for a minute into some groups and just reflect. And I'll offer you that reflection question. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And I hope this will all work as I play the song while you look at the image. I think this will work. Okay.
This is boring.
is paralyzed. I keep throwing it down to 100 at a time. It's hard to find it when your money's gone and you're drunk as hell. On your back with the rats as the stacks you low. Back with the racks and the stacks you low. Back with the racks and stacking you low. I've been twisting to the sun. I needed to replace. The fountain in the front yard's rusted out. All my love was down in a frozen ground. There's a black crow sitting across from me. His wiry legs are crossed. He was dangling my keys. He even fakes the toss. Whatever could it be that has brought me to this loss? On your back with your rats as the stacks you low. Back with the racks and the stacks you low. Back with the racks and the stacking you low. This is not the sound of a new man or crispy realization. It's the sound of the unlocking lift away. You
if there happens to be a multitude of griefs upon you, individual and collective, or fast and slow, or small and large, add equal parts of these considerations. That the broken heart can cover more territory. That perhaps love can only be as large as grief demands. That grief is the growing up of the heart that bursts boundaries like an old skin or a finished life. That grief is gratitude. That water seeks scale, that even your tears seek the recognition of community. That the heart is a front line and the fight is to feel in a world of distraction. That death might be the only freedom. That your grief is a worthwhile use of your time. That your body will feel only as much as it is able to. That the ones you grieve may be grieving you. That the sacred comes from the limitations. That you are excellent at loving. Go ahead, David.
P.S. If there happens to be a multitude of griefs upon you, individual and collective, or fast and slow, or small and large, add equal parts to these considerations. That the broken heart can cover more territory. That perhaps love can only be as large as grief demands. That grief is a growing up of the heart that bursts boundaries like an old skin or a finished life. That grief is gratitude. That water seeks scale. That even your tears seek the recognition of community. That the heart is a front line and the fight is to feel in a world of distraction. That death might be the only freedom. That your grief is a worthwhile use of your time. That your body will feel only as much as it is able to. That the ones you grieve may be grieving you. That the sacred comes from the limitations. That you are excellent at loving.
P.S. If there happens to be a multitude of griefs upon you, individual and collective, or fast and slow, or small and large, add equal parts of these considerations. That the broken heart can cover more territory. That perhaps love can only be as large as grief demands. That grief is the growing up of the heart that bursts boundaries like an old skin or a finished life. That grief is gratitude. That water seeks scale. That even your tears seek the recognition of community. That the heart is a front line and to feel is to feel in a world of distraction. That death might be the only freedom. That your grief is a worthwhile use of your time. That your body will feel only as much as it is able to. That the ones you grieve may be grieving you. That the sacred comes from the limitations. That you are excellent at loving.
So now I would like to invite us into breakout rooms, I think 4 in a room. And again, it's just going to be random. And I'm going to invite you to share your answer to the question, what has been lost to you? And if you don't feel comfortable answering that question, what have you lost, or who? What have you lost, especially this year? You could answer the question, what came up for you in that poem? What is lost? So I'll write it down. Yeah. I'm going to phrase it one other way. What has been lost to you? What have you had to surrender? And I think especially in the last year. Or you can share your reflection on the poem. And I'm just going to, every person, I think, probably will just have 3 minutes to share. And then after 12 minutes, we'll all come back. So Chris, are you ready to put us into those groups? Great. Thank you all. See you in a few minutes.
Wow.
To everyone who's coming back, I misunderstood and created 4 breakout rooms instead of twice that number. And I need to shut down all the breakout rooms before I start again.
That's what we figured when we saw as many people. We were like, oh, I think that's, yeah.
Okay, 17 seconds left.
Everybody will come back.
Did Karen say how long the breakout rooms are going to be open?
12 minutes.
Hold on.
So four people sharing for 3 minutes each.
Okay.
If you could set a timer, that'd be awesome, Chris.
Yeah, I do.
That was fast.
Are
Wait.
we supposed to be pulled back here?
Oh, I thought we were going to do this in
We,
12 minutes.
We were in a breakout room and then we got pulled
New
back.
room. Okay, looks
Yeah.
like we get new rooms, guys.
yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
exciting.
Miss you guys.
Bye. See you in a while.
Okay. So Doug, are you having, did you not get an invitation to join a room?
Yeah, I was in a room and then all of a sudden I left. I was pulled out of the room.
All right.
I'm not sure what happened. Angelica was there and Diane Gornell.
Yeah, but do you see another invitation to join room 1 right now?
No, all I'm seeing
right.
is you.
All right, let me go into that. All right, let me go into room 1 and I'll pull you in there.
Okay.
Doug, can you hear me? Sam, can you hear me? Sam, can you hear me? Hi, Audrey.
Hello.
Hello. People are in breakout rooms right now, but they will be back soon.
The first part of our class, that exercise. But before I do, you can go ahead and mute, be on mute in case you have background noise or something that will help us. The song that I played was Bon Iver, and the lyrics, it was more of a vibe, right? Like the lyrics, you can't really understand the lyrics very well. It is a sad song about lost love, but and it is a song that I turn to when I am I don't know, when I'm just feeling that sense of loss. Bon Iver, that's right. It's called R.E. Stacks, but the words are a little bit nonsensical. So don't worry if you didn't understand the words. It's okay. And then the poem was just one stanza of a poem by Adrienne Marie Brown. And it is, I believe it is untitled, but I will find, I can, before our evening is over, I can post it, post the whole poem. But Adrienne Marie Brown, who I've quoted sometimes, and she has an amazing website where she writes a lot of her poetry. So yeah. Well, I wanted us to just tap into what we have lost, because that is our deepest connection to empathy. I want to also just, so I'm going to kind of turn to the book now. I want to let you know that the book was written by two women. One of them is a doctor of social work and a social work professor at California State University. And the other woman is a greeting card writer. So she writes empathy cards. And also the woman who, let's see, Kelsey Crow, I think her name is, the doctor of social work, is also a breast cancer survivor. And so they just decided to write a book in sort of a whimsical way with a lot of pictures and fun. I don't know if anyone is able to find it. It's a hard to find book, but they kind of wanted to break down how to really reach out to someone when you don't know what to say, and to break it down in a way that is easy to read and easy to wrap your mind around without really, force feeding you something, because there's really not one magic thing you say. It is quite nuanced. So, okay. So I'm gonna, I don't know if I can both do this and call on people. So I'm gonna ask a question. Is there somebody who could call on, Chris, are you able to call on people maybe?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, thank you. So, question of what does grief look like? What does it look like? So, when someone is in grief, when they are grieving, particularly a death, particularly a really close death, there are a number of losses that they are dealing with. It's not just one, right? It's a number of losses. So one loss would be, I think, loss of identity. So if somebody who is close to you has passed away, the part of you that you were with them has also passed away, is also gone. And so there is that sense of loss of your own identity. The person they knew, that side of you, right? That part of you that you only were with that person. So there's a loss of identity. So I wanted to ask now, what are some of the other losses that people might be experiencing that as part of their grief? It's not just one loss, but many. So if they've lost someone who is very close to them, what else have they lost? So loss of identity is one. Anyone want to just come up with a thought, an idea of what some of the other losses are? You can raise your hand.
Kate, you're
Yeah,
spotlighted.
sure. I think about the loss of whatever role it is that person played in your life, like let's say that person, I mean, that person was the person who was best at making you laugh in a certain situation, and they played that role, or they paid the bills, you know, but just the role they played in addition to sort of who they were, if that makes sense.
Right. The role they played, and you also spoke about economic security, which can often be, you know, if somebody did, well, you were talking about the role they played of paying the bills, but oftentimes that can come with some economic security too, which could be another loss. But yeah, definitely, just that reliance you may have had on that person to help your own life. Yeah. Any other thoughts about what else someone has lost if they're dealing with grief?
Carol, you're spotlighted.
Loss of companionship, and not just humans, but pets. So that's important too, because pets are a major part in a lot of people's lives.
Absolutely. I was a part of the UU congregation of Asheville, and there was one support group they ran that was the most popular and longest running support group of like 15 years or more. And it was the pet loss support group. So people were, and there were some people who were in that support group for that long. I mean, for those 15 years, mourning a pet that they had had. So absolutely. Yes. Yes, that companionship. Any other thoughts about what someone has lost? Yes, Angelica.
Angelica, you're up.
Well, when my sister passed away almost 3 years ago, and she was living in Austria, and I was always spending a lot of psychic energy looking forward to visiting her and doing things with her. So I miss not just her, but always that looking forward part, not knowing exactly what we were going to do, but all the potential joyful activities. I miss that.
I absolutely agree. Loss of potential is one of the major losses. So loss of potential of an experience to be had, and sometimes potential for healing if the relationship has difficulty. So there, you know, you lose the potential to ever heal as well. Joyce.
I'm thinking of when you lose someone very young, you lose who they will become as they grow up and grow older. Someone who dies young will always be that age. And you'll never know them the same age as you are ever again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like time stopped in that way.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I saw something on the chat from Laura, I think. Loss of opportunity to transform the relationship. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got one.
Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
I can't remember if I read this or heard this, but it was a mother saying, if you lose your child, their child had died. If you lose your child, are you still a mother? And we lost our oldest grandson. And so now when people say to me, how many grandchildren do you have? I am hesitant not to include him. So I always say all of them. You know, I have 5, including him, but I don't need to say, oh, my oldest one died. I just say, oh, I have 5 grandchildren, period. If somebody would probe further, then I would, you know, I'd say something about it. But, you know, I have other grandchildren, so I'm still a grandmother, but am I really a grandmother of 5 children?
Thank you for bringing that up. That's actually something that the book highlights in particular. The experience of somebody having lost a child, especially if it was their only child. Am I still a mom? Am I still a parent? You know, I was a parent and I lost them. Am I still a parent? And so, and most of the time, I mean, I think the answer is yes. I think we still treat them that, you know, they have been a parent, you know, that's who they have been. And so people who have dealt with, you know, loss of a late term pregnancy or a child, you know, they have been a parent, you know, so they are a parent still. Any other, we have time, maybe one more suggestion of what else what other kind of loss somebody might be dealing with while they're grieving.
Well, this is
Yolanda,
sorry.
Yolanda, I spotlighted you. Sorry.
Okay. I'd say loss of connection. But what Kate had shared, I mean, the loss of the role that they played, I mean, that pretty much covers it all. But yeah, loss of connection, loss of support.
Yeah, definitely that connection, that support. And I think with that, sometimes the book, it talks about a loss of confidence, because there was this person in your life who wanted to be in your life, you know, who was trusted. And so sometimes it can feel like not having that can also be like a loss of, you know, comes with that loss of identity too, loss of confidence. And there's other kinds of grief people may be dealing with, such as being fired or getting divorced, or, you know, all these kinds of grief can also bring up loss of confidence. So a lot of times people in grief are struggling with a loss of confidence. And so that's something to keep in mind. You know, if we are wanting to offer some empathy and companionship. Okay, so so I'm just going to read a few things that keep people from, I'm just going to go over this, a few things that keep people from asking for help. So sometimes we wait, right? We wait for folks to ask for help. But I want to just tell you what this book kind of suggests that will keep people from asking for help. So just, you can, if maybe you can raise your hand or do the raise your hand emoji if any of this sounds familiar, if you've ever heard anybody say this. But sometimes it's shame. Asking makes me feel like a burden. So if I'm really having a difficult time, if I'm kind of in my own grief, then asking can feel like a burden to somebody else. So so that's something that might keep someone from asking. Also, people in their grief don't always know what they need. So sometimes that question of like, let me know if you need anything. That's actually not a very helpful approach with somebody who is grieving. So that's an example of something that we might say that actually kind of distances us from the person who's grieving, because someone who's really in grief doesn't really know what they need, and sometimes that can just feel like another thing to do, another burden on top of all the other stressors they're dealing with. Just feeling overwhelmed. I'm too overwhelmed to reach out. But honestly, you know, and then also just a sense of like, I'm going to reach out and someone might reject me. And so that kind of takes us to the next portion, which is how to be a person who can be trusted with someone's grief and someone's emotional vulnerability. So let's see. Sorry, this is such a weird thing to be teaching on Zoom. I would so much rather all of us be together, but it is what it is, I suppose. Okay, so another thing that they talk a lot about the barriers to reaching out. So if we know someone who is not doing well, or who has been suffering or has had a loss, you know, sometimes we don't really step up and show up. And so there's a lot in this book about finding the courage and the trust in yourself. And one of the ways to do that is just to go ahead and acknowledge that you will not fix anyone's pain with your words. I mean, maybe a little bit temporarily. There may be something you say that sticks, almost like this Lectio Divina and this reading of the poem 3 times. You know, I wonder if there was one phrase or even a word that really stuck with you. And that can be a little bit like speaking to someone who is really in grief. Not everything is going to stick with them. There may just be one word or one phrase you say that's all they remember. And sometimes they won't remember at all. They'll just remember your voice and that you were there, that you reached out. Therefore, your words need not be perfect. So because you're probably not you will not completely fix anyone's pain with your words. Therefore, your words need not be perfect. But they definitely, these writers definitely encourage you to reach out rather than not reaching out. So rather than wondering if, I don't want to bother them, or I don't want to, just be a bother to them, to err on the side of reaching out. I had a friend who passed away in September. I was talking about this in the small group. And one of her like hallmarks of her life was that she would really reach out, like always reach out. So when in doubt, she would say this: when in doubt, reach out. The person can always tell you, no, I can't talk right now, or we'll talk later. But she was just always challenging me and everybody to cut through our fear that we weren't going to say the right thing and just make the outreach. So I wanted to, so this can actually lead to a feeling of well-being in you, because being there for someone in their time of suffering can lead to deeper and more authentic relationships, and therefore joy. So I wanted to hear from you. I'm gonna get so much better at this medium. I wanted to hear from you. If anybody has the ability to share a time when you were worried about reaching out and then you did, and what happened. Does anyone have an experience like that they might be able to share with us? Or you know what, if you really don't mind being vulnerable, you could also share a time that you did not reach out and have some regret and wish you had. So either of those would be welcome at this time.
Diane, you can go ahead.
There we go. One of my friends I worked with has pancreatic cancer, and I hadn't seen her for quite a while because I'm not working anymore, but I reached out for a little while. I sent her some texts and things like that, but I haven't called for that. You mentioned you're afraid you get the wrong time, or you don't know what to say. And I feel like I'm walking around with this burden because I'm feeling some guilt about not reaching out. And I probably should. I mean, I could send cards. I just haven't done it. So, although I think if we didn't have COVID, I would go visit.
Mm-hmm. Right. So right now we have another barrier to our empathy, which is our presence. Sometimes just being with someone and not talking about the grief can be really helpful, but that's not something we don't really have the option.
Right.
To Zoom call someone and not talk is just weird, but to go to someone's house and sit by them and not talk, well, that may be very comforting. But that's not something we have the ability to do right now. Is there anyone else who maybe wants to share maybe about a time that they did not reach out and wish they had, or a time when they were worried about reaching out and then they did? Yes. Looks like Angelica's spotlighted.
Well, when I was in my 20s and foolish, I was dating for a while this really lovely man, although it hadn't become a really close relationship. But then he died in an automobile accident, and I didn't know, I could have tried to find out to whom to express my condolences, and I didn't. And to this day, 50 years later or more, I'm still sad I think of it often. It's that I missed an opportunity to express my sorrow. So since then, sometimes it takes me a while to write or call, but I've also learned it's okay if you write or call months later. It's better than not writing or calling at all. I have found that, in fact, sometimes that's okay because people who are grieving, often everybody shows up in the beginning and then they really start feeling the loss and lonely. And so it's actually okay to get in touch a good time after whatever sad thing happened. So that's my advice. Well, my thoughts.
Thank you. Does anybody have a sense of what are some of the barriers to reaching out? Maybe for you or in general. What are some of the things that keep you from reaching out?
Sometimes feel like you need an excuse to talk to people, you know. You can't just hang out with people or reach out to them for the sake of it to see how they are.
So like awkwardness or not knowing quite what to say, is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So actually awkwardness is one of the barriers in the book. Yes. Possible awkwardness is definitely a barrier, you know. When emotions are that high, things can be pretty awkward. Laura Yamashita.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, not knowing exactly what to say, feeling like there are no words that are appropriate, that are good enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can contribute something here. I'm muted. This is David.
We can hear you.
Oh, yeah. Sort of an admission, you know, feeling like you were wronged by the other person, but still wanting to admit your part in it without expectation that they will reciprocate. You know, so you're like super vulnerable in that situation. I had that with my mom, and I just, you know, took my responsibility for my piece and took a risk, and that was very difficult.
Yes. So empathy sometimes requires getting into the well a little bit with them. You know, if they've fallen down a well, sometimes you got to get in there a little bit. And we'll talk about that in 1 minute, how to take care of yourself in that as well. Okay, Florence.
Sometimes you don't want to remind the person. This happened to my mom where one of our neighbor's kids had committed suicide, and she said something to the neighbor, and the neighbor was like, I don't want to talk about it, you know, that like it was bringing up bad feelings for them and hurting them more than if nothing had been said.
I think, yeah, I mean, you have to follow someone's lead too. I think if you try to say something and the person says they don't want to talk about it, you know, that might just be they don't want to talk about it at that time. And, you know, I think listening is a big part of this. And we're going to talk a lot more about listening skills and constructive listening next week. But yes, Lynn.
Saying the wrong thing, which I think may be part of what Florence is talking about, or just making it worse. Afraid that you're going to make it worse.
Yep. So I think this book does a pretty good job of like reaching out is better than not reaching out, and saying the wrong thing. Like there are some things that are wrong. There are some things that are not helpful, that are unhelpful. And so let's try not to say those things. So, and most of those involve judgment, you know, judgment of some kind or distancing. So we'll talk about that. But yeah, thank you, Lynn.
I'm sorry, I have so much to say. I apologize. I'll try to be brief. But I will say that my mother died when I was 17. And my friends, everybody would totally ignore it because they didn't want to make me feel bad and remind me, when in fact, it was wonderful that people remembered my mother and acknowledged my grief. So I think it's better to err on the side of saying something, however gentle, than pretending nothing happened. That really was very difficult for me.
I'm going to say something that's not in the book. That's just something that I've learned, both through pastoral care training, but also through just experience. And it helps that I'm genuinely a very curious person. But I think one safe thing to say is tell me about them. Tell me about your mom. And that way the person gets to share, all the things that they want to about the person they lost. And the person who they lost gets to kind of live again, gets to come back into the relationship with you. And so sometimes when I don't know what to say, I'll just ask, just tell me about them. What were they like? What were they like for you? And I'm genuinely curious. I'm not grasping for something to say. I also really want to know. I want to hear about the person who's been lost, so that they can continue to be a blessing, so they can continue to show up in the relationships that the grieving person will have in the future. So I do think that's a pretty safe thing to say. That's supportive. Of course, somebody can always say, I don't want to talk about that right now, and that's fine. But I think it's always nice, including a pet. Like, tell me about your pet who you lost. I mean, I think that works for pets as well. Okay, so I want to talk for a moment about compassion versus empathy. So this is focused on empathy and not compassion. It's not that compassion is bad. But compassion, according to these authors, is is noticing that someone is hurting, feeling just for a moment, feeling like some connection to that, and then responding. So compassion is not only a feeling, but it's also an action. James Forbes, one of my homiletics professors, used to always say, so when I lived in New York City, I was in school in New York City in seminary. And, when you preach in New York City in church, almost always your sermon is going to be punctuated by ambulances, going by. And he used to say, the ambulance interrupting the sermon is God reminding us that someone out there needs our empathy, needs a prayer. It's God showing up in the sermon, to pull us out of the realm of ideas and back to, our human connection. And so I always think about that whenever I hear a siren now. I always take a moment, whatever I'm doing, to just stop and, just send out a thought, some energy for that person, a prayer, that they will find healing, that all will be well. So it's noticing, right? So compassion is noticing that something has happened, not just pretending like it hasn't happened, but noticing, and then feeling just a little bit and then responding. So and then empathy, they say here, is compassion plus imagination. And I'm just gonna read this because I think their description is really good. So so this is an example to help make the distinction clear between compassion and empathy, and how empathy is compassion plus imagination. Okay, so one of the authors, Kelsey, is a breast cancer survivor. Survivors often, so imagine that, like, Kelsey, you are a breast cancer survivor. Survivors often hear, both indirectly and directly, that they shouldn't worry about recurrence or be afraid of their disease because with the current treatments available, breast cancer isn't as serious as it used to be. As a survivor, you dread hearing this because it diminishes your very real, very scary experience. To you, these fears are more than valid. Now imagine that you, the breast cancer survivor, are talking with your friend who's getting divorced. This friend is afraid that at age 50, he'll never find love again. But your 50-year-old cousin is actually fighting women off with a stick. Celebrity magazines are okay. So guys everywhere, okay, ladies everywhere, whatever. So your friend is a great catch. So you feel strongly that his fears are unwarranted and irrational. In fact, you're kind of annoyed at his feelings of worry. And instead of comforting him, you just want to tell him to stop worrying about it. He's going to be fine. He's going to meet someone. And in this example, it's easy for you to feel compassion for your fellow breast cancer survivor's fear of recurrence, but you don't have a lot of compassion for your divorcing friend's fears that he'll be alone forever. It is one thing to feel for someone who is in a similar situation to us. That's compassion. But feeling for someone who is in a different situation, that requires empathy. Empathy is the ability to extract the core experience of a situation we know, which in this case is fear of the worst case scenario. That we all know that fear of the worst case scenario. And then use that information to imagine and to feel what it might be like to be in a situation that appears entirely different. The more we practice empathy, the easier it is to access feelings of compassion for people in situations that appear far different from our own. So then they have this picture of like compassion. You know, there's a guy with a broken leg, and then there's a friend next to him with a broken arm, and they both have compassion. The person with the broken arm has compassion of the guy with the broken leg. And then empathy, the guy has a broken leg, and the person who's helping him has no broken bone, right? And so is able to tap into empathy using imagination and to imagine what that must be like. And so often that word imagine can actually be really helpful. I imagine you might be feeling blank. Is this what you're feeling? I imagine that you might be feeling lonely. Are you feeling lonely? And then the person can say, no, that's not it. Oh, okay. Well, tell me what it is. Tell me what it is you're feeling. So this is like pastoral care training. This is what they teach you in pastoral care training. So you can say, I imagine that it feels like this. And then the person can tell you, no, that's not it. You don't have it right. I don't feel lonely. And so that's okay. That's okay. In fact, sometimes it's very helpful for that person to come up with on their own what they're feeling. And then you're like, oh, well, tell me about it. So it's not, so you don't feel lonely. So what is it? Tell me how it does feel. And so that can be a really helpful way to get someone to talk about their feelings so that you can tap into that empathy. You know, oh, it's not this feeling. Well, then tell me about what it is. Any reflections or thoughts on this, the difference between compassion and empathy?
I think is an extremely important point that you're making, Taryn, that to not assume that you know how someone else is feeling. You have to take a point of curiosity and explore with them, because it can shut people down and make them feel defensive, basically, when you are making the wrong guess about them, and they don't, it closes off a potential connection.
Yeah, I think both of the instances, both of the examples I've used are really grounded in curiosity. So curiosity is, I think, a major tenet of this type of empathy that we're talking about, because I think that people can also sense if you're not curious, because what's sort of the opposite of curiosity? The opposite of curiosity is like, well, I know how you feel. I went through this. When I broke my leg, I felt X, Y, and Z. So that's not really curious. That's just telling the person what you went through, which just shuts them down. That's not going to really elicit someone telling you how they feel. Okay, let's see, 8:43. Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of other there's another kind of hold on, sorry, I'm just gonna go to my notes for a second. Okay. Yeah, so I think I don't want to introduce. So the 3 touchstones of showing up are the following, and this is something you may want to write down. Your kindness is your credential. This is what they say. Your kindness is your credential. Number 1. Number 2, listening speaks volumes. See, they're kind of cute in the way they talk about this. Listening speaks volumes. And then the third one is the third touchstone of showing up. Small gestures make a big difference. Small gestures make a big difference. Has anyone had that experience of a small gesture making a big difference that they'd be willing to share? I think you should raise your hand or do the hand emoji, and then Chris will call on you. I think Mary Ann is wanting to share, Chris.
Okay, I'm trying to find her. For some reason I can't. Let me see if I can do it this way.
Oh, maybe I can do it, but then will that mess you up?
Okay, I got it. Okay.
Okay, great.
Marianne, you're muted at the moment.
Hey, now I
Okay.
should be unmuted.
Yep,
Okay.
you're unmuted.
Okay. One of the things that I did for many years in my earlier life was that I was a volunteer EMT where I lived in Connecticut. And when I was taking EMT training, one of the lessons that we had is sort of similar to what we are discussing tonight. And what I learned about the small gesture is that when you, as an EMT, arrive on the scene, it makes so much difference if you can physically touch the person who is injured. I remember once I just happened on an accident on the road, and I was there ahead of the ambulance. So I just called the ambulance and I stayed. And this woman was very upset and anxious. And I just put my hand on her arm, and I said, the ambulance is on its way. It will be here soon. And I could just feel her go, ah. So to me, that was a small gesture. And that was what I had learned to do.
Yes, healing touch is important and also not something that I'm discussing because that's just one of the things that we can't do in a pandemic. But healing touch is definitely a small gesture that can be very healing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Wow, I didn't know that about you. That's cool.
Kate?
Some years ago when I had a miscarriage, a friend just left a kind note with a candy bar on my door. It meant so much to me. It meant so much to me. And I don't remember what the note said. No idea.
That reminds me of a small gesture someone once gave to me. Yeah. Anyone else want to share about a small gesture that actually made a big impact?
Okay, Maureen.
Yeah, so I agreed to be one of the people to call when we were calling everyone in the congregation last April. And this isn't something that it's not really a strong suit of mine. And one of the people on my list was somebody that I knew, and I thought, you know, she's a very independent person. She's not going to need anything, but she was on my list. So I called her, and it turned out that she had a sister staying with her who had dementia. And she was like really, I don't want to say in a tizzy, but she was at a loss for how to handle situations with her sister. And of course, I couldn't really help her, you know, give her advice about that, but I could listen. And we talked, and then I told her I could have someone from pastoral counseling contact her. And she said, well, let me call you back, you know. And when she called me back, she had gone on YouTube and gotten all this help on her own. But she said, but it was just your phone call that opened up for me that I could do these things for myself. So all I did was call, really. But it made a huge difference for her.
Yeah, that's great. I think that can be true too, that one point of connection can lead to many others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's great. Hey, Laura.
So I was just going to share that one of my neighbors here turned 80 last week. And of course, they couldn't do any kind of a gathering, and her family lives all over the country. And so they did do this, one of the videos, I don't know, the tribute videos you've probably seen, where people can record their own. And so I was able to find out about that, and I did it. But then I thought, well, you know, nobody can come in person. So I just went and got her some little baked goods from Alon's and left them on her step. And she was so excited, but because obviously nobody could come in person. So it was a little thing, but it just was a way of recognizing it. And I think it really helped her. I felt like since she was turning 80, she should get something. So.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why I wanted to do the Valentine's, you know, I don't know, like, I think maybe only 50 people participated, but you know, I don't think it's something we would necessarily do every year. Maybe we will, but you know, I'm like, gosh, if there were ever a year to receive a Valentine, this is it. This is that year. You know, it's just a small thing that can help us feel a little bit more connected and like we're not on our own. So, and I think the people who, you know, a lot of people who did receive the Valentines, yeah, we're like happy to get that. So that's it's just a small thing. Okay, so so the next part is focusing on some of the like negative ways to show up, and I'm not sure if I want to end with that because it's kind of ending negatively. So maybe we'll start with that next week. And next week, we're also just going to talk about listening skills, you know, really skilled listening. And also they have this question, what kind of non-listener are you? So we'll answer some of the pitfalls of non-listening. And just speaking to fill silence, which again, like we all do these things. I mean, I do some of these things too. Sometimes I'm better with silence than other times. So anyway, but I think I don't want to try and open up a new topic right now. So I think we'll just leave this, you know, we have a lot to consider tonight. And I guess I wanted to know if anyone has any reflections they would like to share from the poem that we read 3 times earlier. Is there anything, or do we want to read it one more time? You know, just to see what sticks this next time in closing. That might be a nice way to close. So let's do that. Okay, I saw somebody nod, so I'm going with it. Okay. So again, this is from Adrienne Marie Brown, and I can't remember the title, but I will find it. If there happens to be a multitude of griefs upon you, individual and collective, or fast and slow, or small and large, add equal parts of all these considerations, that the broken heart can cover more territory, that perhaps love can only be as large as grief demands, that grief is the growing up of the heart that bursts boundaries like an old skin or a finished life, that grief is gratitude, that water seeks scale, that even your tears seek the recognition of community, that the heart is a front line and the fight is to feel in a world of distraction, that death might be the only freedom, that your grief is a worthwhile use of your time, that your body will feel only as much as it is able to, that the ones you grieve may be grieving you, that the sacred comes from the limitations, that you are excellent at loving. Maybe we'll just do what they do in youth group and have a one-word checkout. So if you want to share with all of us just one word of reflection, what are you feeling right now? I don't know if we can handle this. Raise your hand if you got a word. Barbara, I see Barbara Begner's hand.
Gratitude.
Benji.
Just kind of contented. This has just been really nice and positive.
Anyone else got a word? Yes, Eva.
Introspection. This was really deep.
Lee.
Connection.
Marianne, do you want to go?
Oh, actually 2 words. Thank you.
Joyce.
Contemplative.
Pat.
Lighter.
Florence.
Confidence, instead of thinking, oh, gee, I messed that up. Oh, gee, what awful thing to say, confidence.
Audrey. You're on mute at the moment.
Maybe we could go to Mary Callie.
Okay. Go ahead.
Mary Callie's muted.
All right. I'm clicking the ask to unmute button. All right.
I did.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
Reflection.
Audrey, it looks like you're unmuted now. Audrey, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Hope.
You see, Doug said comfort. Laura said community. Kate said thankful. It's nice to see all of you, even in this way. And it is a weird thing to talk about something so intimate and deep on Zoom. I thank you for your grace as we figured this out. And I look forward to going deeper with you next Wednesday together as we deepen our skills for empathy and connection with one another and everyone who means so much to us. So thank you. I hope you all have wonderful few days until I see you again or you see me on Sunday. But go in love and go in peace.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Taryn.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.